Raila Odinga, popularly known as Baba. To some, he was the voice of the streets, and to others, he was the thorn in the side of the state. To a whole generation, he was family, the man you argued about at your dining table. Raila Amolo Odinga was born on January 7, 1945 in Maseno, Nyanza. His father was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was a founding elder of Kenya. He was the first vice president after independence. So yes, politics was at the breakfast table. But families are complicated. Growing up under a famous name brings attention and pressure. It's not all ceremony, it's expectation. Raila went to local schools, Kisumu Union Primary and later Maranda High School. And his schooling included a time abroad in Germany. That Germany chapter would matter. Raila wasn't only absorbing technology and engineering. He studied mechanical engineering and related technical courses. He was also absorbing ideas, socialism, cross-border solidarity, and a language of politics that was international. That early education added technical thinking to his political instincts. He learned to plan and tinker, and that would show later in how he organized campaigns and coalitions. Into adult life, Raila joined the world of activism, student organizing, labor unions, and community mobilizing. Kenya in the early 1970s and early 80s was tightening. The space for dissent was shrinking. The political culture was getting risky. Raila's emergence was not sudden. It was a long build. He argued, he organized, he pushed for multi-party freedoms as others were pulled to one-party control. Those actions had costs. He found himself in trouble with the state more than once. Arrests, short detentions, interrogations, the kind of things that shape a person. The constant low-grade pressure and the occasional dramatic clampdowns. All this taught Raila early that politics in Kenya was not a debate on stage. It was a survival exercise. Now let's talk about the 1982 coup season. We need to pause here because the 1982 coup attempt, it changed the weather. After that failed coup, the Moi government rounded up scores of suspects and opposition figures. It was a moment when the state hardened. Raila was swept up into that wider net. He was detained, monitored, and at times effectively silenced. These were not short, polite arrests. Many detainees were held for long stretches without trial. The legal instruments available to the state allowed indefinite detention under security regulations. That's a bureaucratic cruelty. It's legal on paper and brutal in life. People lived through sleeping on concrete floors, being woken in the night for interrogation, and surviving on thin food rations. Amnesty reports from the era, survivor testimonies, and later interviews, all this described beatings, isolation, and a system designed to break spirits. This was the dark training ground of a generation of dissidents. For Raila, these years were not theater. They left marks. When you see the determined face on TV, remember, it was carved in cells and not only in rallies. Detained and threatened at home, Raila took exile seriously when necessary. He spent time in Europe, places like Germany, Sweden, and the UK. And even the exile years were full of work, not rest. Exile is a strange thing. You're safe from the immediate danger, but you're also cut off from the small daily rituals of home. The smell of ugali in the kitchen, the familiar faces on the street. Those are more than comforts. They are anchors. He used exile to read, to meet diasporic activists, and to form networks with international human rights groups and fellow activists. He sharpened his language, learned to talk to foreign audiences without losing his local voice, and planned strategies. When he came back in the early 1990s as the multi-party tide rose, Raila returned with both local authenticity and international witnesses. That combo was powerful. A man who looked like he belonged to the street, but who could also speak fluently to diplomats and grant committees. Exile hardened strategy, not resolve. The early 1990s were the years everything else changed. Multi-party politics came back, and Raila became central to the new opposition era. He entered parliament, built a loyal base, and became known for fiery speeches and resilient organizing. He served in government roles later under the NARC coalition after 2002, including energy and public works. This gave him executive experience. That contrast matters. He'd done the street orchestration, and now he was learning the machinery of government. Raila is famous for persistence. He ran multiple times for presidency, and each time he deepened his base. 2007 was the watershed. He ran against Mwai Kibaki, and the election was disputed. The outcome sparked months of violence across the country. More than 1,000 died, and hundreds of thousands were displaced. People carry those wounds. This moment defined a whole generation. After intense negotiation brokered by international figures, Raila joined a power-sharing government. He became prime minister in 2008. That compromise was ugly and necessary at once. It saved the country from deeper collapse, but left many people angry. For some, Raila was the hero who refused to accept perceived theft. For others, he was the cause of the chaos. History will argue the nuances for decades. For the moment, the immediate achievement was the end of mass bloodshed and the path to rewriting the constitution. Serving as a prime minister is an odd job. It's powerful yet constrained. Raila used the role to drive reforms and to push for a new constitution. The 2010 constitution, which is now a landmark in Kenya's legal history, it introduced devolution, a Bill of Rights, and mechanisms to check presidential power. It was a long road to get there, and it required compromises across the political spectrum. Raila's fingerprints are on that story. He was a negotiator, a pressure point, and the public face for change. Behind the public man was a private life that paid a price. Raila married Ida Anyango, and together they raised children. The family endured raids, uncertainty, and the long silences of detention and exile. The bigger public pain came in 2015 when Fidel Odinga, one of their sons, when he died. That grief landed not as a headline, but as a private wound. Raila's later political life involved alliances and legal pushes. In 2017, after another contested election, the Supreme Court of Kenya annulled the presidential results. This shocked many and brightened the idea that courts could be independent arbiters in East Africa. The rerun consolidated different dynamics. In 2022, Raila ran again as the Azimio la Umoja candidate, and the political landscape moved yet again. He remained a key opposition figure and later engaged in various national conversations. This is also the era when he became a statesman of the continent, taking up AU roles and advising regional projects. The 2007-2008 violence was devastating and complicated. There were local grievances, electoral failures, ethnic politics, and a toxic mix of economic frustration. Raila's supporters felt their victory was stolen. Opponents blamed him for incitement. Independent commissions later documented the root causes. Young men recruited into violence, policing failures, and political actors who exploited tensions. The truth is nuanced. Blame is not a single arrow. But whatever your view, the loss of human life is a fact we must carry with respect. The power sharing deal that followed and the constitutional reforms were a national attempt to fix what had been broken. Now back to the darker parts so that we are clear. When the state detains without due process, it's not about confinement, it's about erasure. Erasing the routines of life, the dignity of family, and the trust in institutions. Amnesty International and survivor accounts recount beatings, sleep deprivation, and cruel interrogation methods used by security services during the Moi years. Nyayo House in Nairobi became a name people whispered, a place associated with secret detention and torture. Families waited weeks and months for any news. Human rights documentation exists. People took risks to tell their stories. This is the kind of history that creates long shadows. Exile looked lonely, but it was strategic. Raila used time abroad to raise awareness, meet activists, and to build alliances. Being outside gave him a soundboard and a shield. It allowed him to learn new tactics for mass mobilization. Media savvy, organizational structures, and legal strategies for pressuring regimes. When you come back from exile with international allies ready to vouch for you, your fight looks different at home. You're not just a rebel, you're someone with witnesses. Raila was not a technocrat who loved spreadsheets. He was a mobilizer. He spoke to crowds, he built movements, and he cared about the mass base. He taught young leaders how to organize, and he often rewarded loyalty. His style could divide. Some loved the clarity and directness, others disliked the combative tone. But his ability to transform discontent into organized pressure is undeniable. For better or worse, he made politics feel participatory for many who had felt excluded. Legacy is messy. Here's the honest list. He fought for multi-party democracy, and that's a big win. He was central to the 2010 constitution. He mentored dozens of leaders. He made mass politics part of Kenya's modern identity. On the other hand, he contested elections. There was the 2007 violence. Polarizing rhetoric at times. These are real too. People will argue about him for decades. That's what big figures do. They forced the nation to argue with itself. In mid-October 2025, Raila traveled abroad for medical care. Trusted reports from major international news agencies confirmed he died while receiving treatment in India. It's a large national moment, and how a country responds to the death of such a public figure tells you something about itself. Some will grieve as a child loses a father, others will reflect on the arguable errors and achievements. So yeah, that's it on this one. It's a really sad one, and let's just talk about the moments. When did you first hear Raila speak? What is the most wow moment for you? what's the most moment for you, and I'll see you guys in the next one.